Chapter 232 to 234. Clank. Her twin swords, Otto and Kogarashi, that she got from Golden Lion Shiki, clashed with the long sword of the strongest swordsman alive. She was honestly feeling bitter. When Big Mom died, she was quite happy. She assumed now she was the strongest woman alive. Then her brother said there is another bitch above her. How infuriating. But now that she had managed to learn Hashoken, she believed she could beat, or at least match, Yamato. Everything was smooth. But then this happened. Hawkeye Mihawk was a monster. No, he was a god. Maybe she would sound a bit strange calling people gods left and right out loud, but in her mind, she was still a girl who had grown up where the title god is common, and she was impressed enough to call Mihawk that. Hawkeye Mihawk was just that good with that dark long sword of his. It moved gently by air and blocked all her more than aggressive attacks. This was bullshit. How can he so calmly match her? More so, she was in her hybrid form. She was much stronger than him physically. That alone should be enough to overpower the man, but it clearly was lacking. His sharp golden gaze annoyed her more. A swordsman with golden eyes. It was as if she was a mere copy of his. Normally, she would say he was the copied one, but this time, as she felt him easily playing with her, and even overpowering her every now, and with barely any effort, she could only call herself the copy. Clink. Mihawk's blade tried to slap one of her swords away, but she easily blocked it, almost mirroring his technique using her eyes. Actually, it wasn't even a technique. Now that she gave it a bit of thought, he hasn't even used a single proper technique yet. She shouted some things like Sky Sword Style, Dragon's Tail, Dragon's Wrath, Hyperion's Rage, Sky-Splitting Slash, and many more dumb names out loud. But he was calm, he was quiet, he was just moving a stick around him. He hadn't even used his sword as a proper blade until now. Just how strong was he? Frankly, Mihawk wasn't that strong, even with a sword. He was only able to play with her like this because she was using a sword, and he was literally the master of sword. He could read her movements as if he had instead of her. He could counter every possible sword technique she or anyone could use. If Rocky had thrown her sword away and fought empty-handed, she would have more chances than now, even though she is much stronger with her swords. Fighting Mihawk with a sword was like spraying fire on magma and expecting the magma to melt. Speaking of which, a wave of magma shaped like a fanged dog head launched towards Wiper. The attacker, Akainu, wore a grim expression. Wiper didn't dodge it. He instead raised his own fist and fired a basilisk a size bigger than Akainu's magma dog. Akainu scoffed at it. What would gas fire do against solid magma? That's what he thought. But even he was surprised when the snake made of blue fire parted its jaws enough to devour the magma, and as they came closer, the dog disappeared inside the snake's mouth. Not even ashes dropped down on the ground. A simple smoke left the snake as it vanished in thin air. Akainu froze in his spot, his signature frown creeping into his face. Impossible. The shock only lasted 2 seconds before he swung his fist forward, his technique that was able to take out half of Whitebeard's face in the manga. The fist of magma flew towards Wiper, who grinned at it. He was sure of something after seeing his fire basilisk eating out the magma in seconds. That meant the first of magma flew through his chest. His grin didn't quiver. The fist disappeared inside his chest as if vaporizing in the air because of the heat of his fire. That meant his fire was many times hotter than Akainu's magma. Maybe it was because of the liters of acetone he had drunk just before, but it nonetheless made his fire much hotter than Akainu's magma. But of course, Wiper until now was comparing his fire's heat with Amon's lighting. He was underestimating himself. Amon's lightning heat was getting hotter. His volts were stuck at 990 million for years, but while the volts were stuck, his heat was rising. It was rising beyond the natural heat of this world. Back in the day, Amon tested that this world's lightning temperature was 10x lower than his original. That also applied to his Goro lightning. But now, as time passed, every time he was stuck at a breakthrough point, his lightning temperature kept increasing, just like when his temperature had increased when he was trying to break through the 250 million volts before leaving for the moons years ago. This time it was at least 5x hotter than this world's lightning temperature. When compared to that, Wiper was foolishly looking down on himself. Now that he was against a similar powered opponent, he understood just how strong he was indeed. Wiper showed his teeth as he whirled his spear around his hands. This was his 336th spear, all the previous ones melting under his fire. He needed a proper spear, truth be told, a spear that can hold his fire's temperature. Looking at Whitebeard's naginata, he turned his head forward. Maybe he can reach out for that. But first, he had a red dog to take care of. Wiper clenched his fist tightly, his tanned skin slowly turning blue as he focused his fire on his knuckles. And in the next instant he threw his fist at the Admiral with the sound of crispy, dry fire enveloping the place. Akainu had to force his legs to move before he was turned into fumes. Rocky was, more or less, on the losing end, but Wiper was winning. Uraj, Tsumi, and Hancock were together, in a team. They were strong, but not as strong as Yamato, Rocky, and Wiper to move on their own, so they planned to move in a pair of 3 and kick asses as a group. Things were smooth for them. No matter how strong the enemies were, these 3 were fine. Hancock and Urouge were heavy hitters, while Tsumi simply froze people or cut them with her wind style. It was honestly just a breeze. Until King, the Wildfire, and Vista jumped at them. Those 2 were clashing amongst themselves before. King might not seem like it, but he carries a sword and is a decent swordsman. They were fighting amongst each other, King winning, of course. He wasn't honorable enough to just use a sword when he has 2 pairs of wings resting on the side. He attacked with all a sword, his fire, and his wings. So he was winning. Then, the 3 of the Sins stumbled up to them. The 2 of them, King and Vista, exchanged glances before rushing at the 3 of the Sins. They can fight any time, but the third parties should be eliminated first. They were the followers of a young emperor. They shouldn't have dared to come here. Yet they did, so they should prepare for their deaths. Ah! A slash ran across Hancock's stomach, causing blood to spray out even though she had covered herself with armament. She clutched her stomach in pain and groaned. The attacker was King, who tried to slash again, but Urouge stepped in the middle. He didn't dodge nor try to block as King slashed at him. King's eyes shone briefly as to why the enemy took a hit head-on before he realized why as a scar appeared on his chest, the one vanishing from Urouge's. Hancock clenched her jaws and forced her wound to stay shut and ran to assist Tsumi, who was barely standing her ground against Vista. She was a swordswoman, too. She's in fact been Rocky's teacher back in the day, though nowadays she rarely uses the blade. But when she did, when she mixed her wind to sharpen the blade and ice to give it a more deadly feeling, she could hold against someone like Vista, too. However, it was true that she was the weakest Sin, so Hancock had to help her before she got her neck chopped off. Urouge could take care of King himself. Urouge's power level is inconsistent, or maybe it would be right to call it relative consistent. As long as the enemy is strong, he would be strong too. Well, at least if the enemy's haki is not so higher than his for his reflect to not work at all. Also, he had absorbed some of Amon's lightning before jumping, so he was a bit charged at this fight, unless he was forced to spend it all quickly. The red-haired girl was bleeding. How cute. He almost wanted to keep her as his personal torture toy. That'd actually satisfy the internal rage that he's been suppressing for years. But he can't do that. He has to kill the girl here, right now, because if he took her with him, Amon would come at him. He was honestly more scared of Amon than Kaido, even if the latter man was probably the stronger one. He was about to go for a finishing move, a move that'd cut all her limbs and make her immobile. He would love to send only her torso, still alive, back to Amon. But right then, boom! The ground shook. It trembled and many staggered. Not Daffy, though. He was a puppet anyway. Controlling his movement wasn't hard, though he did turn around to look for the cause of the quake. Surprisingly, it wasn't Whitebeard. The ground shook again, from under the frozen sea. In the next instant, a huge metallic head, bigger than a marine warship, leapt in the air after creating a hole in the ice. In an instant, Doflamingo's eyes widened, while the sound around the world vanished briefly before the machine made a strange cry that blinded the whole place in a painful noise. The horrifying part was, Doflamingo recognized this. An ancient weapon was here. The Commander-in-Chief, Kong, and the 5 elders were in truth inside Marineford the whole time. It won't make sense otherwise when the Marines were almost at the brink of extinction. But they were staying back the whole time. It's not as if they were that strong. Kong was a 92-years-old man, while the elders were more than 800 years old. Because of age, Kong was much weaker than before, although still stronger than any admiral fighting down there. Same with the 5 elders. If not trained, anybody would weaken in this world. Gecko Moria would be a prime example. That man once clashed with Kaido, and how did he die? He died in his sleep, killed by Amon. That's what happened with the elders. They were but a husk of their prime selves. Until now, they were depending on Jewelry Bonnie's devil fruit powers, who had only recently escaped the Marie-Joie. She is, just like them, an 800-year-old demon. Her memories were washed off, and she served the government as a brainwashed puppet until she regained some of her mind because of an experiment gone wrong. They would get her back soon, of course, but the problem still remained. The problem with her power was, if the target is not herself, she can only make them a kid or an old man. That's her limitation. She can't make others into their prime adult self, and instead only old or super young. The elders preferred being old men instead of being stuck in mere kids' bodies. But how much strength can 5 old men exert? Their bodies were shaped like men in their 80s, so their strength wasn't that impressive. If only they trained their hockeys diligently like their master, then maybe in this 800 years they'd have some chance against that thing. Against that ancient weapon in the far. The bald elder was the first to dash towards the weapon of destruction. They were merely admiral level and didn't have any destructive devil fruit like Akainu. That's because their ruler, Imu, didn't like devil fruits. Not at all. Imu had eaten a devil fruit, but he was very reluctant to use it because if used carelessly, it could kill even him. It's that dangerous. If not for Imu-sama's displeasure with devil fruits, all the celestial dragons would have all the godly devil fruits of the world, no? That's the problem. They could only rely on their hockey and weapons, but they didn't have any choice left. This was a fucking ancient weapon, something that, if used correctly, can destroy the island in seconds. The chance of them destroying it is, on the other hand, is meager, and maybe even impossible. These 5 have seen that same weapon wreak havoc in the world before, and even their prime selves could barely hold against it. But destroy it? It's nice to dream, but let's not go overboard. The other 4 elders followed the bald one after a short breath, Kong doing the same. They didn't know at whose side the weapon was, but it certainly wasn't theirs. Then they noticed something. As they reached closer, something became clear. Whoever was riding the weapon was not having a pretty time with it. They were barely controlling it. Now, this did brighten their faces a bit. If the driver can't control the thing, it won't be as dangerous as they thought it to be. Of course, they would still not be able to destroy it, but at least the damage would be minimized. With all these thoughts running in their mind, they were soon in front of the weapon. People gave shouts at their sight. 6 more Admiral-level enemies had joined the Marines. Tsk! If only they knew how much more danger they were in right now. With their respective weapon, they hit the ancient weapon. Clank! Bam! Pong! Their different weapons made different sounds, yet not even a scratch appeared on the weapon, but it did screech as if it was hurt. That's the point. The driver receives a fraction of the attack done on the weapon, since, after all, It is run by the driver's hockey entirely. This meant there is a low chance that they could knock the driver unconscious by attacking the weapon. But their attacks were too weak. Just then, a huge fist made of octopus tentacles flew to the weapon of mass destruction and created a large bam sound. Turning their head to the left as one, they saw him, Kong. The 5 elders might have been restricted to not eat any devil fruit, but the formal fleet admiral wasn't. He had an interesting power. Kong's right hand was a mass of octopus limbs, while a pair of eagle wings sprouted out of his back. He floated in the air with his feet looking like eagle claws. He ate the manifest fruit, a special paramecia. He can manifest the physical characteristics of anything he has eaten, anything. Even without his 3 types of conqueror's haki, he was dangerous just with that alone. Though unfortunately, he had only eaten some squid, eagle, crab, tuna, sea king meat, and beef this morning. He was expecting to fight, so he planned to eat food from strange animals at first, but unfortunately he had a stomachache just today. Bam! His other hand turned into a lobster's claw and slammed on the weapon. It didn't bulge again, and this time, it whipped its head like a snake at Kong, who got hit and was flown back to the city, crashing into buildings. Almost the entirety of the weapon's body was under the sea even now, and the elders could only imagine how much destruction it would cause just by moving around if it were to come up fully. Right now, their goal was to keep it down there. Just like the elders were thinking, the ancient weapon would have been able to destroy the Marineford in seconds. But Vivi was an inexperienced girl. After training for barely 2 months, she still had a hard time controlling the body of the weapon. If she could use the multiple weapons hidden inside the worm's insides, the Marineford battle would end immediately. But then these elders jumped in, attacking Pluton, which was basically an exoskeleton of some sort to her, non-stop. It did no damage, but it did hurt. Vivi struggled to move her head, her worm head, and snapped another 2 elders towards the city yet again. Ha! Look at how weak they are. She doesn't even need to use her entire body. Her cheer came to a stop as she felt a shadow covering her body. There were small cameras around the body, not thousands or hundreds since it overwhelmed her brain, but enough to keep watch of most of her body's sides. From these cameras, the vision streamed into her brain as if she was seeing with her own 2, or in this case, 36 eyes. A giant hand, big enough to crush the alabaster palace into pieces, was coming down towards her head, curled up into a fist. The fist was green, as if the owner was a mobster of some sort, and moving her gaze, she confirmed it to be exactly that. A monster with horns and fangs. It was an Oni, something that her husband supposedly turned into recently. She stared at the large fist. The punch won't do much damage, but it would hurt. She would hold on, of course, but nobody liked pain. Amon was gone from her side the moment she penetrated the ice, and now she was about to get trashed by a giant. The fist came closer to her face as she stilled her spirit for the blow, but just then, no. Lightning flashed in the sky. Bzzzt. All her 36 eyes, at least the ones that weren't under the sea, locked their gazes at the sky. There, a man with a similarly giant body wearing white clothes was falling downwards like a meteorite. No words came from her mouth, and she only smiled. Which princess didn't like her prince coming to save her at the last moment? Before the giant, Ors Jr.'s punch could come in contact with her, the meteorite of a man crashed into its neck and shoved it down on the surface of the ice. The sound of old and large bones cracking into pieces filled the area as if lightning roared in the far sky. Vivi didn't know, but just by the sight of her husband, some had already given up on this war. The War of the Best was entering its final stage. When the original Amon returned, the first thing he saw was Ors Jr.'s fist flying towards Pluton's earthworm-like body. So he released his body size and turned into a half-giant, then leapt downwards like a white meteorite, both because of his clothes and the lightning crackling around his body to boost his speed. Crack! His feet slammed down on Ors Jr.'s neck, causing the sound of neck breaking to burst out. The huge body of the green-skinned ancient giant, bigger than any other giant present in the Marineford, slammed down onto the ground with a snap of its neck, crumbling on numerous Alliance pirates' ships. There was a brief silence of shock that subsided with Ace's shout, "Little oars!" Immediately after, thundering roars clouded the area in an instant. Multiple Whitebeard pirates' army ran towards the body. The 5 elders, on the other hand, paled as the cloud of dust around Or's body slowly cleared up, and an Amon, now back to human size, tidied his white coat. Amon wore a long white coat that reached his knees with the buttons freed, revealing his black vest and white shirt under it. He knotted his red tie, the color matching the small horns in his head, with a smile on his face. He looked more like a man going on his long-awaited office vacation than anything else. "Hello, ladies and gentlemen." He exchanged glances with the elders. "I heard you were giving my wifey a hard time." Along with most of the fighters, except for the ones who couldn't even spare a glance, Ace also froze in his spot. Another Emperor of the Sea was here. From the start, Ace had a bad feeling about this war, and it seems his gut was right this time. Everything is in chaos. He could see his pops fighting off a few vice admirals, though he was merely just slapping them away. Then there was Vista, who tried to fight Mihawk, but the warlord seemed to have taken an interest in that Einherjar girl instead. Yozu was busy fighting that monk Skypiean, Urouge, his name was Ace, recalled. Ace also noticed Scopper Gaban rushing to Marco, who was fighting that Yamato girl. Gaban easily made way for Marco and kept the girl busy himself. The moment Marco was freed, he flew towards Ace. But guess what? His own grandpa, Monkey D. Garp, had jumped in and punched the phoenix on his face, causing the bird to crash to the ground. His own grandpa. Then again, Garp wasn't his blood, as much caring as he was. Could that be the reason that Garp is with the Marines now? What would he do if Luffy was in his spot instead? Ace shook his head softly. This wasn't the time for this, nor could his mind handle the truth of this question, because he had just lost a friend. A close friend. Ors Jr. was lying limp on the ground, his body not moving at all. He heard that thundering crack that came from his neck. Giant or not, there was no way the beast could have survived that. Ha! Every time someone close to him died, 2 faces flashed in his mind, Deuce and Mr. Fool. Honestly, as pleasant as it was looking back at their memories, it pained him afterwards when he realized that they were no more. Maybe. "Hey, Ace." Ace froze. That was a whisper. Calling him from his back? But there were only the 2 mask-worn executioners behind him. Suddenly, hope flickered in his heart. Could it be? Without turning his head backwards, he asked quietly, "Who is this?" As expected, the answer came from behind him, though he was unable to tell which 2 executioners were talking. "What? You don't recognize me?" The voice said. It did sound familiar, but it was a bit strange. Even if it's someone he knew, why would they ask such a silly question in such a serious situation like this? "No. Should I recognize you?" He kept his voice as low as possible. He didn't want Sengoku, who was not far from here, to hear him. At his words, he heard a deep sigh instead of a reply. "So you forgot this fool already?" "Huh." This time, Ace's world spun. His expression froze and his eyes shook, along with the word fool, and then that voice and tone. Ace took a single second before streams of tears trailed down his eyes. "Fool, is that you, my friend?" he asked while staring forward, holding a breath. Amon, too, wasn't in the cloud car anymore. The moment his original body returned, Amon directed his second body to flicker and return from Skypiean with a cloak of invisibility from Germa. Wearing that cloak, He snatched the streaming snail from Buggy's hands and started to record the fight properly, of course, focusing the camera on his original body. Ace's reaction is going to be fun too, Amon muttered in his mind. Instead of dispersing Amon 3 and Amon 4, he instead sent them to replace the executioners behind Ace, since no matter how many clones he had activated, his original body can still access his full power. Though as playful as he was, he planned a grand revelation for the poor Ace. He at least deserved to know who Mr. Fool actually is. There was also the case of Amon 5, who was created a few seconds ago. He was interested in the mission he bestowed upon him too. Amon 5 was currently not in this battlefield. Shrugging, he floated above everyone, invisible. He was a mere bolt of electricity. No one would be able to sense him with observation hockey because of that. Well, unless he directly tries to attack them. Laughing, he focused his camera on his original body, streaming all this all over the world. "Amon, you brat!" The bald elder, who was the one to always speak on behalf of the other elders, groaned at Amon. "Did you bring this thing here?" He pointed at Pluton. Amon whipped his head at it and, instead of answering the elder, clicked his tongue. "Oi, Vivi! Why are you standing still?" He sent a bolt of electricity at the body of the ancient weapon. "Wreak havoc!" The elders didn't have any chance to react as Vivi's head whipped like a snake and slammed 3 of them far into the city. At this, Kong groaned, and instead of attacking Vivi, he clasped his palm as if grabbing something in the air. Immediately, a purple barrier of hockey materialized around Amon's body, or at least around the place where Amon's body was just a second ago. "Oh my, you also have it?" Amon's voice came from behind Kong, who immediately coated his neck with Conqueror's hockey, already knowing normal armament wouldn't work against the attack that was about to hit him. A chop fell on his neck, or at least it would have if not for the force of Conqueror's hockey swirling around it. There were 3 stages to Conqueror's hockey, and Kong, as stated by Shanks, knew all of them. His armament and observation isn't anything noteworthy, but his Conqueror's hockey sure is. That's the reason why he could block Amon's, a variation of King Punch, though the blow did throw the man off the air as he crashed on the ground. Amon decided to finish Kong right here and focus on the others later. Everyone was busy with their own problem, and Garp was still standing by, so he would finish them one by one. With a flash of lightning that blinded Kong for a millisecond, Amon blinked in front of him as his forearm enlarged, becoming the size of his actual body. He coated it with armament, Ryo, Conqueror's hockey, a bit of electricity, and released them all in the form of a king's Rokugan punch. As his fist approached the wide-eyed old man, who had by then spread his Conqueror's coating from his neck to toe, a blinding explosion of blue light clouded the place in dust. All this was being watched by people from all over the world, one of them being Sabayodi Archipelago, where a certain Dwelly Bonnie watched the stream. She didn't cry this time, because this time Whitebeard wasn't betrayed and stabbed into his chest, so instead she felt anger, pure, uncontained anger. She was anxious too, but her anger was the aggressive one. She will get back on Teach for this. Isn't he the reason for all this war and stuff? He needs to die, no matter what, because if anything happened to Whitebeard, she won't be able to forgive herself. As for why that was the case, moreover for a girl who was locked in Mariajoie for the last few centuries. Amon was also interested. Amon 5 loomed over the sky, observing her every reaction with his blood-red eyes.